Ranking heroes in Idle Heroes is a tricky business. Why? Well, it's because which hero you should build on your account is often determined by your main homeowner. The hero you're using as your main carry hero to dominate most game modes will be heightened or diminished by the heroes you use alongside them. So of course you're always looking for good supports. We mention this a lot, however, who are the best homeowners, who are the best main carries, and who should you be prioritizing on your account? Well, that's what we're going to be discussing today, the best homeowner heroes to make. If you don't know what a homeowner is, it's very simple. When you get yourself a Void 4 hero, which requires just about 5 million Stellar Shards, you can go ahead and unlock the Cloud Island. In the Cloud Island, you will be granted a home, and in that home are 4 areas where you can choose from a selection of tenants that will grant you additional bonuses to your heroes. These bonuses are attack, HP, and speed, and a home offers more scaling than any other thing in the game, and that's why when you do see super strong heroes with massive amounts of HP and attack, it all comes down to the home. Not to mention that speed is crucial for later game content where enemies are very fast. So today we'll be talking about the main homeowner heroes you want to be focusing on in your account to ensure that you're making the best progress possible depending on where you are in the game. This will function as a top 5 list, but the idea is not for you to think of this as a ranking, but more of an order within which you should consider these homeowners. It's because different homeowners require different amounts of progress, and you may find heroes near the top of this list are a little bit out of reach for most of you when it comes to finding a hero to dominate most game modes for you, because a lot of the heroes you'll see on this list will be Transcendent, and Transcendence heroes require Sublimation. Sublimation basically looks like this. It's a tree you can find called the Tree of Origin, and within it, when you improve specifically Transcendence heroes, you will progressively be allowed to improve their abilities. Some people go ahead and blindly improve these. That's often unwise, as the materials needed for this are fairly difficult to obtain, but generally active skills are worth improving, so are the passives here. But of course, to improve the passives, you need to improve your tree level all the way up to Tree of Origin 5 to be able to improve the final passive, and different heroes offer different bonuses. So when it comes to considering whether a homeowner will be good for you, consider how much sublimation you have on your account and whether you can improve that active skill to a form higher than it normally would be. If you can, this will make them a much more viable carry hero. As well, making them a homeowner also might require them to have artifacts, not just for themselves, but for the heroes you're using them alongside. So with a massive list of artifacts in the game, I'll also be covering some pre-requirements that are worth considering when building these heroes. We begin with Eloise, probably the most common homeowner hero you will see. The reason she's so good as a homeowner is because she is the only non-Transcendence hero you will see on this list. Therefore, her tree, as you can see, is empty. It requires no sublimation. Also, when it comes to the base heroes in the game, she scales with attack and HP better than anybody else, and that's because her floor, her limit of power, starts off really high. But of course, her ceiling doesn't quite get as high as Transcendence heroes because they are just that much more powerful. But of course, she requires less to work and therefore is a fantastic early homeowner for you. The other thing that makes Eloise brilliant is her specific list of tenants. You'll see that in tenant spot 1, we have heroes like Flora, Ithaca, and Onkiramaru. You can kind of be flexible with whether you choose Ithaca or Onkiramaru here. I personally prefer to go with Onkiramaru, but there are arguments to go with Ithaca, of course, if you need more progress in broken spaces. But the big ones for Eloise are tenant spot 3 and 4. As this contains Tix and Carry, 2 of the most influential support heroes early on, and they cover Eloise's weaknesses, as they're able to shut down Garudas, which will cause you a lot of problems in the Vortex as you push through, and including the Realms Gate against Forest Waves. Carry also, just by stealing energy, can help you so much in so many game modes, because if you don't know, the way Eloise works is she wants to get hit by attacks. Eloise has a lot of internal block, and when she does block, she will counterattack and hit the opponents, and this is why she can provide so much pressure for your team. If you improve her attack and her HP, she'll be able to take more hits and deal more damage when she attacks back. By using someone like Carry, you can steal the opponent's energy, which means they're going to do basic attacks, and basic attacks don't hit as hard, but it doesn't matter how hard your opponent hits Eloise. As long as the attack is blocked, she will attack back just the same. This is why Tix is also really good, because his silence is able to hit back all the same. As well, what's nice about Carry and Ticks is they do something when they die, so it doesn't really matter if you can't level them up really, really high, because if they're E5, they'll still be really, really good, and when Ticks dies, he's going to curse opponents, and when the cursed opponent dies, they'll deal lots of damage to the rest of the team, and with Carry, she can actually resurrect and come back and steal more of your opponent's energy, and that's just going to help keep the pressure on, allowing Eloise to survive more, and of course, win you more fights. So that's what makes Eloise a really good homeowner. She scales really nicely with the attack and HP she gets, she's easy to build, very accessible for you, and the only artifact you really need to make her work well is a singular golden crown. At base level, Golden Crown gives you 18% attack, 25% HP, and a massive boost to all damage reduction. This makes Eloise more tanky, meaning when she blocks, and of course when she just gets hit in general, she doesn't take as much damage. The HP is great for keeping her alive, and the attack is great for dealing more damage. This is just a good fundamental artifact that will give you immediate value. A lot of the other artifacts you'll see recommended are artifacts you want to improve in the Almost Workshop, making them splendid, or glittery, or radiant. And if you didn't know, when you do get artifacts of that form, they unlock bonus abilities. But the thing with Golden Crown is when it does get improved, all it gives is even more damage reduction. So the immediate value of just getting that 25% damage reduction, attack, and HP in its base form is just so impactful for a singular artifact choice. Therefore, it's the most valuable artifact to pick up as a first artifact, and also because it just allows Eloise to do everything she needs to, it's arguably good because you can pick it up, grab it, and then go and focus on other artifacts before eventually coming back and finishing it to Splendid. So yeah, it's just a really powerful artifact that you should go ahead and pick up, and because getting one mysterious artifact isn't too tricky nowadays, a singular crown is all Eloise needs to work. Her tenants are fantastic, and that's what makes Eloise the best early homeowner for most accounts. The other thing about this list is the rest of the heroes on here are going to be transcendent. And therefore, that's also another thing in Eloise's favor. You don't need to build a Transcendence hero. If you didn't know, Transcendence heroes are really difficult to obtain, requiring 5 million crystals of Transcendence to build, and that requires months of grinding in the Void. It requires you to be good at the Realms Gate. It requires you to get hopefully lucky with the amount of cores you can pull. If you're getting gems, obviously it's easier to buy them, but you will need to get cores from events and be opening them to allow yourself to progress. As well, you need to be good at the Void Vortex to get more and more crystals, and as well, you need to be prioritizing progress in the Void Arc to get even more. So being good in the Void gets you more crystals, which means you can get a Transcendence faster. But to be able to be good in the Void, you need a hero to begin with, and that's why a homeowner Eloise is also really strong. So with all that said, when you can start building Transcendence heroes, should you go ahead and make one a homeowner? Well, the general popular recommendation is to not do that until you have 2 Transcendence heroes, and there's 2 very important reasons as to why that's the case. First of all, upgrading these homes takes you quite some time, as you need to generate the resources necessary to do that. It requires you to get wood, rock, fluorite, iron, just get that all on your account, along with the toolboxes and master's toolboxes needed to level this up. So in the time it takes you to get 2 Transcendence heroes, you should hopefully have these homes decently established. I'm not expecting you to have level 105 homes like I do here. That's for late game players, but you do want to, of course, get your homes established to hopefully at least 50 by the time you can start considering making a Transcendence hero a main homeowner. In addition, guys, when you go ahead and start progressing yourself, you'll notice that Transcendence heroes are always needed as tenants for other Transcendence heroes. Tenant Spot 2 and Tenant Spot 4 are the places you will spot Transcendence heroes, so finding a pairing of Transcendence heroes can be super valuable. You can see here, the Fairy Queen Vessa uses a Mystic Fairy Freya. You can see that Sword Flash uses Lord of Fear Aspen. Having good pairings like that are another really important thing to have when considering a Transcendence homeowner. So of course, that's why I say 2 Transcendence heroes is the perfect time to be making a Transcendence homeowner. So, who's next on this list? Who do we pick on our list of good homeowners? Well, it wouldn't be a good homeowner list without Sword Flash. Sword Flash, the first ever Transcendence hero added to the game, and still holds up as a very powerful hero. Yes, there are better Transcendence heroes, but when it comes to early value, you can't go wrong. As well, she requires Lord of Fear Aspen as a tenant, and his ability to control opponents is very useful for giving Sword Flash opportunities to keep the pressure on your opponent without taking too much pressure herself. It's important that you get yourself the right artifacts for this combo though. For Sword Flash, you will want a Splendid Melodic Strings. This gives attack, holy damage, and energy. It allows her to do an active skill in round 1 with good damage, and if you're using the right heroes alongside them, you can even do an active skill in round 2. The reason this is important is because of Will of the Sword, which grants impeccable flow. You can read here on the last sentence, each kill by Sword Flash grants her 1 layer of Impeccable Flow. This changes her active skill from an attack that hits a single target to an attack that hits everybody. That's why giving her 2 active skills back to back is really important. That first active skill, granted by Melodic Strings, will target the lowest HP opponent, killing them hopefully, and of course if that's the case, she will gain Impeccable Flow. If you can energy feed her by giving her more energy, the next round, in round 2, she will do an active again, but with the Impeccable Flow, she will hit everybody. And that's the main strategy for wiping out opponents with a Sword Flash, and why you want to make her a homeowner so she has as much attack and speed as possible, so she can outspeed your opponents and deal as much damage as she possibly can. Therefore, it's crucial that if you're using a Sword Flash as a main homeowner, you have an Ignis. Ignis's active skill gives 100 energy to the ally she is next to, so Ignis doing an active skill next to a Sword Flash will go ahead and grant her 100 energy, giving her another active skill. Also, if an Ignis dies, that's great. That's 100 more energy for the neighbor and gives them control immunity. So you could have a 200 energy Sword Flash and all the extra energy is just going to turn into more damage, or maybe Ignis will feed energy and then die in round 2, giving you another active skill in round 3, which is always enough to keep the pressure on your opponent and hopefully win the fight. It's recommended that you don't take Ignis any higher than 10 star, as you do ideally want her to die, so all you need is that first round active, and then once that's done, yeah, her dying, super fine, so it doesn't matter about leveling an Ignis up, which means she's really accessible as well. You only need 5 copies, you don't need to worry about building loads of 9-star and 10-star food to make her E5, 10-star is good enough. On top of that, 2 other heroes to consider are Rogan, whose passive Warpath Roar will improve the crit, attack, crit damage, and speed of all assassins on your team twice, and actually your normal heroes also benefit from that just the one time through, and yeah, this is a huge bonus to have alongside a Sword Flash. As well, if you go ahead and make him Void 3, the bonus is increased by different percentages. You can see that crit damage goes up to 25%, and that double bonus means, of course, Sword Flash is going to have an extra 50% crit damage, which makes it easier for her to kill that person who is the lowest HP. And to make killing that lowest HP hero easier, we have our last hero to recommend alongside a Sword Flash, which is a Drake. He offers the ability Defense Down, which targets the lowest HP opponent and removes all of their defensive abilities. If it's a carry, she can no longer dodge. If it's opponents with armor, that gets stripped away. If they have any damage reduction, it's gone. It's so helpful for dealing with opponents that are low HP that you can just focus down, and it makes Sword Flash's ability to kill them much more consistent, which of course grants that Impeccable Flow, giving you that really strong active. Don't forget to consider Sword Flash's tenants as well. Fiona is the best in tenant spot 1. Of course, for tenant spot 2, we'll be wanting a Lord of Fear Aspen. Although if you're much later on into the game with many Transcendence heroes, you could argue Scarlet Queen Halora is better used as a tenant here. In tenant spot 3, you want to go with either Inosuke or Onkiramaru. Inosuke comes ahead as he has a skin, Onkiramaru does not, therefore he has better scaling, but between the two of them, it's really a close call because Onkiramaru is also a tenant for Lord of Fear Aspen and several other heroes, so will be more versatile for your account. But if you're purely focusing on Sword Flash, it's arguable that Inosuke is the better pick. And finally, for tenant spot 4, you actually want to go with Gloria here because Asmodel the Dauntless and Lord of Death Azrael are difficult to recommend early on. There are very niche times that they could potentially be good, but really when you've got 2 Transcendence heroes, you do not have room to go and build one of these, so go and focus on a Gloria. By the time you could comfortably build a Lord of Death Azrael or an Asmodel the Dauntless, it's likely that you'll probably be using a different homeowner by then. Now, before we get into the final 3 homeowners that I wanted to talk about today, there's another hero I think should get an honorable mention, and you might find it surprising that she's an honorable mention, but that's a Fairy Queen Vesa. Some of you may have expected her to be actually on this list, but funnily enough, Fairy Queen Vesa is not as good as many of you think. The great thing about Fairy Queen Vesa is her active skill deals a lot of damage to one target, but then does that 4 times. That's huge if you have 1 opponent, or maybe 2, because they're going to get focused by that active skill. But if you're in fights where there's 5 or 6 opponents, it's difficult for that to be consistent because it's just 1 poke going around to several opponents. If you think back to Sword Flash, whose Impeccable Flow allows her to hit everybody, surely it's just way better value to hit the entire team for tons of damage rather than having these poke shots that come out. So the reason Fairy Queen Vesa is such a common and popular choice is because you'll see her do really well in game modes like Broken Spaces and Star Expedition, where you can target and focus all of those hits onto a small number of opponents, therefore giving her much higher damage potential. But of course that drops off as soon as you get to 5 or 6 opponents. So our advice here is to consider Fairy Queen Vesa for boss fights, but also consider that she's not going to be your main homeowner. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at Fairy Queen Vessa's tenants, she requires Rogan, who you should already have on your account if you were doing anything with a Sword Flash. She gets Sword Flash in tenant spot 2. She gets then 2 terrible heroes, Arania and Flora, in tenant spot 3. And then in tenant spot 4, she gets a Freya. Now, this is interesting because actually a lot of accounts should already have Rogan and Sword Flash if you were going down that Sword Flash homeowner route. If you choose Vessa as your 3rd Transcendence hero, you then can add her to the account to be a support hero, giving you shields and healing, but also it means that you can pivot into her as a homeowner whenever you need to deal with Star Expedition or boss fights. That's actually really useful because you don't have to be fixed with the homeowner you have. By placing your Rogan, your Sword Flash, building yourself a Flora, and getting yourself a Freya who you could inevitably make a Mystic Fairy Freya, or maybe you've got 4 Transcendence heroes, you could even already have a Starwing Jara, which would be quite useful. You of course could then have a good way of making Vessa a solid homeowner. The big mistake that players make though, and I was guilty of this for some time, was just focusing your attention too much on Fairy Queen Vessa and not having backup plans for when that was your thing that wasn't pushing you in most game modes. Yes, she's going to be great against certain puppet fights. Yes, she's going to be really good against those bosses and Star Expedition, but those are things that you only have to deal with a certain amount of times. If you can find yourself other strategies to deal with Realms Gate, and of course Star Expedition only comes around once a month, you may find that Vessa is low value during these off periods. Therefore, I would consider Vessa a secondary homeowner to switch to when you need to do boss fights, but always have a primary homeowner instead. And that's why I think she's just an honorable mention, and I just wanted to cover her here and make that clear for a lot of you players. You don't need to focus everything onto a Vessa. Instead, have ways of making her a homeowner with alternative plans available to you for when you're dealing with other opponents. In fact, a lot of people do this when they have LOEs. They use LOEs with Fairy Queen Vessa and then make Fairy Queen Vessa a homeowner for certain game modes, but then most of the time, LOEs is their main carry hero. Same goes for Sword Flash when you have 3 Transcendence heroes, and you could even argue that, folks, it's probably never going to be Vessa as your main homeowner because, as you'll see with this list, there's always going to be someone that bit better. So who's our next good homeowner to consider when building your account? Well, when you get to the wonderful point of having arguably, I think 5 Transcendence heroes is the really good time to recommend this. You could probably do it with 4, but Starwing Jara. She is bonkers. What makes her so good is the fact that making her a homeowner makes her really fast. If she's outspeeding opponents, she can pop off and petrify, rock lock, and freeze cold chill your opponents. This is massive crowd control that's going to shut them off and make it really hard for them to do stuff in response. As well, if she's faster than the opponents every round, if you have enough ways of giving her energy, she will do an active skill all the time, shutting them down, and your opponent will do nothing. This is huge in the Realms Gate. It's phenomenal in Void campaign, and it is crucial to making progress in the Void Vortex in later levels. So hopefully you folks can get behind a Jara as a main homeowner. One requirement for her, though, is that you can give her sublimation. There are heroes like Sword Flash who benefit from improving their skills but don't necessarily need it, but it's always a good idea. But Jara really loves it. If you take a look at her active skill, you get better control chances. As you improve this even more, the windows within which Petrify, Rock Lock, and Freeze Cold Chill increases. And you look here, you gain even 15% control precision just from the sublimation node. As well, when she gains focus, she gains even more control precision and control immunity offset. So by improving this passive here, you can improve the amount of focus she has, and when fully upgraded, you even start the fight with 2 layers of focus, giving you even more consistent control effects. On top of that, she also feeds herself energy whenever an enemy is petrified, and she also just gains energy whenever an ally releases their active skill. And therefore, here comes the crucial thing if you were planning on making Starwing Jara a homeowner. You need to energy feed her. And that means you need your heroes on your team to do active skills consistently, therefore giving Jara tons of energy and allowing her to pop off. The more energy she has, the more consistent her control effects become. It's not just 100 energy you want. Sometimes you can go as high as 200, and her active skill, at least its chance to control anyway, will trigger twice. It's bonkersly consistent. Take a look here. If you run Demon Bells on your account, you gain the ability Energy Outburst when you upgrade them, and that's going to give you 20 energy with an additional 50% chance to give another 10. So whenever your heroes do active skills, they are feeding energy to the rest of your team, including that Starwing Jara, and also allowing the team to generally do more active skills, which feeds even more energy to Starwing Jara. Therefore, it's really recommended if you wanted to make a Starwing starring Jara as a main homeowner, you have 16 demon bells. That might sound crazy, but that's what you need to have 4 splendid demon bells. By having 4 of your heroes all with splendid demon bells, you're going to get a lot of energy feed, hopefully very consistent active skills, and that will allow Jara to do very consistent crowd control. To make it even more consistent, you could consider giving Jara a Rui Scepter, and that's going to improve her control precision and improve her control immunity offset. That means she ignores a lot of control immunity on opponents and is more precise and has a higher chance to control opponents. This is brilliant, increasing that chance that you shut them down, and as we said with Jara, speed is key, and this artifact gives 75 of it. By being faster than the opponent, locking them down, they're not going to attack you, and that gives room for the rest of your team, including Jara, to clean up. And that's another reason we recommend you have 4 or 5 Transcendence heroes before you go ahead and build a homeowner Jara, because you need heroes to clean up. There's no point crowd controlling your opponents consistently if no one's able to kill them. And as well, you need energy feed from these demon bells, because if your opponent ever does break free and you're not able to clean them away, unfortunately they will just kill you and you're just delaying the inevitable. So with consistent energy feed from demon bells and Rui Scepter to improve that crowd control even more, you can go ahead and have a very good time with a Jara. Some people even consider using Staff Punisher of Immortal or Melodic Strings on a Jara, and the reason they do this is because they want Jara to have even more damage. If you make her a homeowner, don't forget that she does gain a lot of attack from doing that, and that will allow her to kill opponents more efficiently. So in some cases, it's good, especially Void Campaign, to have Melodic Strings and Punisher of Immortal, because they will allow Jara to deal more damage, making it easier for you to clear away the opponents before they do anything nasty to you. I see a lot of players who are using Fairy Queen Vesa as a main homeowner with multiple Transcendence heroes, and they built Jara to be a tenant for that Vesa, but really it's most likely that they benefit more if they made Jara the main homeowner, assuming they have the Demon Bells and the other artifacts to back that up. If that's something you can do on your account, I strongly recommend starring Jara as a Transcendence hero and a main homeowner, because you will crush opponents all the way up to 255 in Void Campaign. Not to mention the huge progress you're going to make with your Void Corruption in the Realmscape. When making Jara a homeowner, you want to have either Jara herself or Ithaca in tenant spot 1. Arguably Jara is better because Ithaca is an assassin and they give bad scaling. In tenant spot 2, you want to go with Scarlet Queen Halora because it's unlikely you'll have a Star Alchemist Holmes Young on your account at that point. You can go with Eloise in tenant spot 3, she's perfectly fine. And you can go in tenant spot 4, funnily enough, not Sword Flash. If you're focusing on Jara as a main homeowner, building a Sword Flash would be redundant, because if Sword Flash isn't a main homeowner, she's pretty bad because all she's good for is damage. So actually I'd recommend Holmes Young here, because he is just fine to put in, and the main reason anyway for having Jara as a homeowner is speed, and regardless who the tenant is, the speed scaling is the same, so you can get away with not having a Sword Flash. That opens opportunities for really good Transcendence heroes to come on your account as well, such as Fairy Queen Vesa, Mystic Fairy Freya. With those two plus the Jara, that's already going to be great tenants for the Vesa, so of course that's also brilliant. And of course with Scarlet Queen Halora and Mystic Fairy Freya, that's a ton of support, great active skills helping you out, and of course that energy feed is going to benefit both of those as well, because Abyssal Corruption from Halora and the Evolutionary Factor from Freya, especially if you can sublime her last passive, is going to be really, really strong. If you're thinking of another hero to put in there, why not consider Lord of Fear Aspen, because his basic attack is actually able to improve your ability to offset control immunity. A lot of people forget about this, but Lord of Fear Aspen does indeed remove 18% control immunity from your opponent for 3 rounds, and actually you can improve other bonuses as well by improving his basic attack, and of course he himself does control opponents, giving you even more pressure from crowd control. That actually brings us to another honorable mention. Aspen and other heroes are sometimes required to be quick. If you give Aspen a Rui Scepter, sure, that basic attack is going to be fast, but if he's still slower than your opponents, that's not very good. Some people like to make a hero like Aspen, or even sometimes Mystic Fairy Freya, a homeowner as well. The reason they do this is because they need them to be quicker to get their skills off before maybe your main homeowner does something. And that's a really nice ability to have, because if you do get that basic attack off first, you'd reduce the control immunity of your opponents, which then of course allows Jara's crowd control to be more consistent. So making Lord of Fear Aspen quick as well can be hugely beneficial when using a Jara. So some people do make secondary homeowners an option, purely for the speed. So don't forget that that's something you can do on your account. And that's why I'd recommend Lord of Fear Aspen, or even someone like Mystic Fairy Freya, whose ability to produce evolutionary factor and poison opponents, which is huge if your opponent removes poison from themselves and you're using Snake to grant you extra bonuses. Getting that poison out before you go ahead and use your main homeowner is going to massively improve your damage, because Snake gives you 80% extra damage against poisoned targets. So if you can get that poison on with Mystic Fairy Freya before your homeowner goes off, that's tons more damage. So a little thing I want you to keep in your mind as well is you don't just have to have one homeowner. Sometimes learning what speeds are required and pushing your hero to be slightly faster than your main homeowner can be really useful for maximizing your progress. So sometimes you do want to make other heroes homeowners as well, and that's why there are other homes in the Cloud Island. It is worth mentioning though, don't do this more than you need to, because any resource you put in a second home is a resource that has been taken away from your primary home, and of course that's going to reduce your overall attack and HP scaling on your main hero. So only put the minimum amount you need in to give yourself that speed advantage. Once you've got yourself an established account with lots of sublimation and plenty of Transcendence heroes, it's now time to consider the big heroes that are going to absolutely dominate the rest of the game for you. Jara has pushed you up to 255 in the Void campaign. Your days of using Eloise or Sword Flash are long gone. Who is going to be the big colossal hero to carry you? Well, take a little look at my account momentarily, and you'll see I have an Asmodel the Dauntless with Giant Killer because he is an A-tier hero. This is really important. If you have yourself an A-tier hero on your account with Giant Killer, they should be your main homeowner, because A-tier heroes are bonkers. Well, most of them anyway. There are some that aren't that great because they're just support heroes, but if you've got a big damage dealer like a Sword Flash or like my boy here, Asmodaddy, you will find that with that Giant Killer, you are going to outperform the next heroes on this list. So, although I know most players will never ever get their hands on an A-tier, if you're a budget player that gets super lucky in the Soul Temple, or maybe you're a spender that just got a little bit crazy with their starry gems, picking up an A-tier hero is huge for progress, and then that hero should absolutely be your main homeowner, and you want to get them as much attack as possible, if that's the case. That said though, for those of you that can't get an A-tier, who else should you consider? Well, the other big blowout heroes are, of course, Mockman, first of all. He's great. You can just get by perfectly with a B-tier copy, and he absolutely wrecks once you improve his sublimation. Improving his active skill means he's going to do tons more damage, and he's going to destroy your opponents really nicely. His counterattacks are going to keep pressure on. The amount of attack components in his active are brutal, and of course, once you improve his light slashing, it's only going to make him deal even more damage. So improving that is great. This passive as well, except for the very, very final one here on the Noble, as this is going to improve his chances of switching form, which isn't that great, is still brilliant. That's going to improve your damage as well. So giving yourself tons of damage on a Mockman, even by improving his basic attack, maybe if you've got the spare sublimation, he is going to ruin opponents. Making him a main homeowner, pushing him as strong as you can, he will wreck. And that's a really good way to push Void campaign, actually, and even have a good old time in PvP. A Mockman with a melodic strings will keep up the pressure, and you'll have a good time. You may consider running Lord of Fear Aspen alongside him, as his ability to horrify is very good and gives Mockman more opportunities to attack, the same reason you use him alongside Sword Flash. Giving your main damage dealer windows to attack because you're using crowd control is always a good strategy, so a Ruby Scepter Lord of Fear Aspen is always something to consider alongside your big main homeowners. Also, don't forget about support heroes, Scarlet Queen Halora, Mystic Fairy Freya, Fairy Queen Vessa, all these heroes that absolutely give you so many bonus stats, so much more defenses, are going to be crucial for shutting down your opponent or improving the damage your hero does, and that's going to improve their survivability and overall performance, and that's going to make your big heroes like Mockman do really, really well. There is one problem with Mockman, however. Mockman's tenants suck. You have to choose on Tenant Spot 2 between Sword Flash and Arania, two heroes that I ideally would not build when I have 6 Transcendence heroes, so I'd probably wait until 7 because I'd want a good team first, and Tenant Spot 4 is Starwing Jara, so at least that's okay. But unfortunately, there's not much else going on here when it comes to those Transcendence heroes that stand out. So either you have to bite the bullet and build someone not that great for tenant spot 2, or you have to go with Onkiramaru. Now, the Onkiramaru can be good when you have 6 Transcendence heroes, and when you get a 7th, you can finally put that Sword Flash in to be just a pure tenant, so that's okay. And if you actually did use Sword Flash earlier, you hopefully already do have Onkiramaru, so that could be good. Also, Onkiramaru is a tenant for Lord of Fear Aspen, so remember when we're talking about getting him nice and quick, hopefully you still have the Onkiramaru on your account for that. Tenant spot 1, though, you've got between Mockman and Focus. Both are very solid. And tenant spot 3, you have 2 rangers here. You have Freya and Eloise. Pick your poison there. Doesn't really matter which one you go with. Most will probably actually choose here the Freya, because funnily enough, with Freya, you probably will already have forest flags that you have used with Vesa. So if you've got forest flags on your account and maybe you're using your shadow flag with Onkiramaru or something like that, it actually might be more beneficial to choose a Freya here. That said, though, loads of people awaken Eloises, so you might find yourself one with good attack stats there too. So whatever works for you, either way, getting yourself a Mockman can be quite tricky because the heroes you need for him to work are annoying. Mainly that tenant spot 2, those 2 Transcendence heroes are not ones I would want to prioritize building. That said, though, if you are later game with a very established Cloud Island and the Sublimations, Mockman will not disappoint, and if you gave him Giant Killer as an A tier, he is one of, if not the most powerful hero in the game. So who's on number 1 homeowner at the current moment of me making this video? Who is the strongest Transcendence hero to make as a homeowner? Well, it shouldn't surprise you, it's the new boy. It's Doom Terminator Vulcan. This hero is bonkersly strong, with so many attack components and so many easy ways to establish them, and an active skill that has so many different things to read, including the fact it can crowd control. Doom Terminator Vulcan is nuts. If he stacks up enough bonuses and does an active skill, he's going to annihilate teams. Improving this active skill with sublimation and his passives just gives him even more of an opportunity to dominate, and he is going to absolutely change the way you fight. Max his entire tree, go nuts, and Doom Terminator Vulcan will slay. You do not need him with Giant Killer to push through campaign. That's how crazy it is. You do not need an A tier. We've already seen phenomenal things from a Doom Terminator Vulcan. So if you are looking for a hero that is budget friendly in the sense that you won't need an A tier who can perform better than anybody else, currently Doom Terminator Vulcan is your best bet as a homeowner. There's only one problem, and it's similar to Mockman's. Poor Mr. Vulcan unfortunately has some really iffy tenants. He's got Eos and Asmodel the Dauntless, and it's not looking like we're going to get Elena, the new Transcendence hero, in on here either. So unfortunately, we're going to have to just wait until we get more options as Transcendence heroes. Hopefully a really solid crowd control or support hero comes out, but annoyingly, Eos, despite the fact she's a good suicide hero who can steal opponents' energy, or a burn setter-upper, or even a damage dealer, she's probably not the hero you want in tenant spot 2, although she is the best scaling attack tenant in the game, so that's fantastic. Although Asmodel the Dauntless, an interesting hero later on because he can debuff the speed of opponents and also buff your team, he's a solid pick, but if you were looking to build this strategy early, you won't be having the bonuses of having a Lord of Fear Aspen or a Starwing Jara, heroes that can shut down your opponents, making Vulcan survive, rack up those bonuses, and pop off. You may find that earlier on, if you're trying to force out a Vulcan, he's not going to be as good as maybe someone a little more consistent who can use Lord of Fear Aspen as a support. Also, his tenants, look at them. They're mostly light and dark heroes, bar this Azrael and Arania copy here. And Azrael and Arania are not going to do anything for your account, so they're awkward builds as well. So I find it difficult to justify Vulcan as an early pick as a homeowner, but of course, once you have an established account with plenty of Transcendence heroes, that's when Vulcan is really going to shine. Hopefully, though, DH Games do release a really nice support hero in his tenants, which will probably change things, where maybe an early Vulcan is good if you've got the sublimation to back him up. And the same goes for Mockman. Maybe we'll get someone new that can be a tenant for him that's going to give good support. Could even be reasons to build Mockman early. There are people testing Mockman plus Lord of Fear Aspen and having a very, very good time at the moment in the early game, so you could even consider Mockman as an early homeowner, probably more so than Vulcan if that was a strategy you wanted to implement. Of course, it's by no means necessary, and the other strategies we've laid out here hopefully do work for you. And that is it, my guide on homeowners. We've talked about a lot today, using LOEs, using lots of different Transcendence heroes, and even considering boosting smaller ones up just for their speed. Always make sure in the back of your mind you're considering how you could make Vesa a homeowner. Fairy Queen Vesa is very, very good in boss fights and Star Expedition, so it's always good to consider if you can run her on your account, because actually switching to her as a homeowner during that week can be really valuable for your guild. But all the other times when you're pushing Void Campaign or Realms Gate, there will always be a better pick. Whether it's a Vulcan, a Mockman, or a Jara, there's going to be someone who helps. Heck, it could even be an A-tier hero if you're like me and pick one up in the auction house. Or maybe you're super lucky as a free-to-play player and pull an A-tier yourself from a Crystal or from the Soul Temple. Maybe you're one of those people, and if that's the case, let me know in the comments section. Either way, folks, I hope this video has been helpful and pretty in-depth in thinking about the game, and I want to leave you with this. Whenever you're deciding what heroes to build and who the strongest heroes are, always focus around your homeowner. They are the only hero that will matter for you if you support them and make them strong, due to the nature of the Cloud Island being pretty linear, giving you only the option to put one hero in there. It's always better to focus on just one hero, make them as strong as possible, and dominate every game mode you can. People who spread their stuff wide will normally underperform, and that unfortunately will lead to more losses. There are people who argue that a holistic team is great for things like PvP, but honestly, PvP is not going to give you the same amount of rewards, and if you fall behind in everywhere else, like Realms Gate, like Campaign, you will just get power crept from the other people that did focus on those game modes in PvP. So to any of you wanting to get good at PvP, my advice is get good at the Void, get good at Void Campaign, get good at PvE game modes first, because once you've got that resource generation down, you can then begin to compete with other people. But if your attention is to spread thin and build yourself a PvP team, you will just fall behind and you will get wrecked. So folks, hopefully you found this useful. I'll see you next time, and if you have any questions about homeowners, drop them in the comments section down below, and thank you for tuning in. Until next time, happy idling.